Welcome to the Sixth Floor Museum, and thank you for being with us for another of our Living History programs. One of my responsibilities at this museum is to manage our ongoing oral history project, and that's an ongoing audiovisual project where we go out into the community and around the world and talk to people that remember President Kennedy, the assassination, and the aftermath, and we invite those individuals to record interviews with the museum that we then share with students, teachers, researchers, and historians around the world. And every so often, a storyteller emerges that we like to bring back for one of these programs. That's what Living History is all about. And our speaker today, as Sharon has mentioned, has done an oral history with us, but has not spoken in a forum like this ever. And so it's a really exciting opportunity to hear today from Rio Sam Pierce. Rio served in the United States Marine Corps during World War II. When he returned home in 1946, he joined the Dallas Police Department, where he worked for 27 years. He was in charge of basement security at Dallas Police Headquarters on the day that Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald. So we have a very interesting story to go over today. Rio will celebrate his 91st birthday this July. So please join me in welcoming Rio Sam Pierce. Rio, thank you for being with us. We're looking at a picture of you from around this time period, a few years before the assassination. You joined the Dallas Police in 1946. What was it that prompted you to become a police officer?
I guess to keep from getting hungry at the time.
Yeah?
I just got out of the Marine Corps and I didn't have a job, so I had a friend that I was in the Marine Corps with that lived out here at Mesquite. And, of course, I was from West Texas. And he was from here at Mesquite. And he said there was some job opportunities in Dallas. So my wife and I just caught a bus and got off there and started looking, I guess.
Okay.
I was working for a dairy delivery when I saw the ad. They was going to hire, I believe it was 9 or 12 police officers. And so I told my wife that I thought I'd try to do that. Took the test, but I went to close the tech auditorium. It was jammed full of people taking that examination. And I said, if they're going to hire only that many, I might as well look for another job. And I had forgotten it. And I got a notice to report. So that started it all.
And you rose up the ranks pretty quickly. You started off in patrol.
Well, not too quick.
Well, by 63, though, you were a lieutenant.
Yes.
And that meant that you were in charge of about, 150 men, something like that, in 5 different stations?
Yeah, and 15 supervisors, I believe, and about 150 men, yes, sir.
Well, you were pretty well known, especially among the police officers that I've spoken with, and they typically describe you as a no-nonsense kind of guy, kind of a tough boss. Would you say that was true?
Well, I've heard that was said, yes.
Well, let's talk about 1963. You weren't a political supporter of President Kennedy. I believe you didn't vote for him, but you did admire him. Tell me what you liked about Kennedy.
Well, I guess to begin with Kennedy, and in fact, all the Kennedys, I always admired somebody that could just stand up and start talking, and he was one of the tops, I believe. He could stand up and speak and draw the attention of the crowd. And of course, I didn't agree with him politically, but sometimes these people that you admire, you don't have to agree with them on everything.
Yeah. Were you excited when you found out that Kennedy was going to be making a trip to Dallas in 63?
Well, not really, because, presidents come and go for visits, and so it wasn't anything extraordinary as far as I was concerned.
There had been some vocal political extremists in Dallas which had heckled Adlai Stevenson. They had heckled Vice President Lyndon Johnson. Were you and your fellow officers concerned about Kennedy's safety?
There was some concern because of some of the activities that had occurred when they mentioned that he was coming, and some of the activities that had occurred prior to that. Yes, there was some concern.
As it happened, you were off work on Friday, November 22nd.
Yes.
They had nothing for you to do that day. So tell us where you were and how you found out about the assassination.
Well, I had a little land down in Ellis County, and I'd gone down there to do some fence work or something, and was coming back home. And there's some guys passed us on the road and just rolled their glass down and told us that he had been shot. But they laughed, and so it didn't occur to me really what had happened until we got home, and the neighbor lady and my wife was crying and told us about what happened. And that was the first real knowledge that I had of it.
Now, there were hundreds of police officers involved in the president's visit. Did you feel left out in a way because you didn't have an assignment that day? You weren't down here and participating in what was happening?
I never felt left out if I was left out. I had...
Did you call in that day to see if you were needed?
I didn't call. They had my phone number, and I figured if they needed me, they'd call me.
Okay. And that call didn't come?
It didn't come.
Okay.
And it was a rare thing, I think, for them to call people at home because it was already set up ahead of time. They knew pretty well at any time that they had an occasion like that, they knew what the need was going to be. And I don't recall them ever calling anyone from home.
When you turned on the TV and you saw the now familiar images of Dallas Police Headquarters just crowded with the news media, what did you think about the way things were being handled down at police headquarters?
Well, it was chaos. It was just complete chaos. And I'd had a little experience with other minor things, that created a news interest. And I don't know if there's any reporters in this crowd or not, but
That's okay. You speak your mind.
News reporters was always there. They won't know what the news was.
Well, prior to Kennedy being shot, was there a good relationship between the Dallas police and the Dallas news media?
I think that the news media and the Dallas police always had a fairly good relationship. There wasn't any animosity as far as I ever knew between them.
Okay.
Now, there was some reporters that, like any other group of people, I guess, you got some that don't conform to what you might think ought to be right all the time.
A little more aggressive, perhaps?
Probably.
Okay. We'll come back to the news media in a minute when we talk about the transfer of Oswald, but there was another victim on November 22nd, 1963, a friend of yours, Officer J.D. Tippit.
J.D. Tippit, yes.
How did you found out about the president being shot when you got home. When did you find out that Officer Tippit, your friend, had been killed?
I don't remember exactly when that information came to me.
Would you say that hit you harder than the death of President Kennedy?
Well, I think so. It was a closer relationship. Somebody you knew better. A president is a pretty distant figure out there somewhere. And I've never had any real close relationship with people of that nature. So, yes, the death, Tippit and I were friends.
Tell us a little bit about Tippit. I know you knew him quite well. What kind of person was he?
I don't know if J.D. would mind me telling this or not, but I guess J.D. and I hit it off pretty good because he was a East Texas country boy and I was a West Texas country boy, so we more or less hit it off okay.
Was he one of the officers that you were in charge of?
Well, at the time, no, but he had worked for me, yes, but not at that time.
You told me once that Tippit always treated everyone with respect, and when we met a couple years ago, you said that you feel like it was that part of his nature, the fact that he treated everyone with respect, that led to his death. Can you explain that?
Well, like I say, J.D. was just a plain country boy, and he respected everybody that he ever met. I don't care who it was, whether it was criminal or who it was. He treated them with respect.
And what do you think happened that day? You tied that directly to the shooting of Tippit. How do you feel like he approached the situation that day that possibly led to his death?
Well, I don't know, but being a police officer, I'm thinking there was something about Oswald that drew J.D.'s attention. Because Oswald was just walking down the street there on 5th Street, and something caught Tippit's eye, and he just wanted to stop and talk to him, see what.
Now, Officer Tippit got out of his car and was walking around the front of the patrol car when he was shot. Would that have been standard procedure in a situation like that, or was there standard procedure?
I think it was pretty much standard, yes.
Okay, so as far as you're concerned, Tippit didn't do anything out of the ordinary that day?
I don't think he did anything out of the ordinary. You can't get out of the car with your pistols drawn on everybody you want to talk to.
Right.
So I think J.D. there's something about Oswald that drew his attention, and he just wanted to talk to him.
Jumping ahead for a moment, did you go to Tippit's funeral on Monday?
That's true.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, I don't know what you mean by tell you about it.
What was the experience like for you? There were a lot of officers there.
Yes.
Mrs. Tippit, Marie Tippit was there.
Yeah.
Just what was that experience like?
Well, if you've ever lost one of your family, I think it would be a similar experience.
Had you been to other officers' funerals before?
That's true.
Okay. Would you say that Tippit was well liked among his fellow officers?
I don't know, I doubt very seriously if J.D. Tippit had an enemy down there.
Well, we might come back to Tippit towards the end when we start talking about theories and other aspects of the assassination. But let's move on to Sunday, because you were off Friday, but you were also off Saturday, correct?
I was off Friday and Saturday, my regular days off.
Okay. And you reported to work Sunday morning about 7 o'clock, as I recall.
Well, a little before then, about 6:30.
Okay. Well, I want to show a map here of the Dallas jail office, and this will give you a sense of what we're going to be talking about. The little striped line from the jail elevator all the way through the office to that spot in the basement there is the path Oswald took. And then the dotted line from the Main Street ramp all the way down is the route that Jack Ruby allegedly took that day, and where they converge, of course, is the moment when Jack Ruby shot Oswald. Now, Rio, what was your assignment that Sunday morning?
Security the basement.
Secure the basement. Were you given any specific instructions?
Well, no, I had officers assigned at every exit and entrance. And I guess the only thing that a lot of people don't know, don't understand, I was called chief at Kerr's office, and told to get in front of the armored car that was going to it was a fake deal. Apparently, to make the general public think that he was going to be transported in an armored car. But they were going to put him in a detective plane car. He was going to be laying in the floorboard when they left. And so after the armored car left, the detective car followed it. When they got down there so far, that armored car was going to go off. And that detective car go on and deliver him to the county jail.
So the armored car was a decoy.
Decoy,
Okay.
yes, sir.
Now, had you been told that there had been threats on Oswald's life?
No.
You were not told that?
No.
Okay. Did you think that the whole procedure, the armored car, the decoy, did you think that was a little strange?
I guess that's second guessing, but I wouldn't have done it that way.
Had anything like that ever happened in your time with the police department?
No, I guess that was the biggest event that ever occurred there. I've handled lots of prisoners and taken lots of them to county jail, but I never went through the process of getting an armored car to do it.
So I want to be clear. You got into a police car and you drove up the Main Street ramp out onto Main Street, correct? And so you were coming around the building when the shooting took place. Is that right?
I went the wrong way up the ramp onto Elm Street. Came around the building and got in front of the armored car.
Got in front of the armored car. Okay. We have some footage from our KRLD collection, and you'll be able to get a quick glimpse of Rio. We're going to look at it again and slow it down, but let's listen to the narration, too.
Now, this is the armored truck that will carry Lee Harold Oswald from the basement here of Dallas Police Headquarters downtown to the Dallas County Sheriff's Office and the Dallas County Jail. Strict security precautions have been exercised from the very beginning and have been even increased this morning as fear arises and grows stronger that someone may attempt to take the life of the man accused of murdering the President of the United States. Inside the basement here at Dallas Police Headquarters, guards are stationed at points all across the inside of the basement. All incoming cars throughout the morning have been carefully checked. Even the police vehicles have been searched inside the trunk and inside the rear compartments of paddy wagons that have entered here in the basement. Officers have checked every vehicle coming in, and no one who is not a member of the press and not able to show identification can enter the basement. The basement is empty except for a large gathering of reporters who are now watching the truck being moved into position.
All right, let's take a look at that last segment in slow motion, and so you can see Rio in the car. There he is. Now, when you drove up that ramp, it said that that's the moment that Jack Ruby, when
Okay.
Yeah.
I drove up the ramp. Officer Bond was at that entrance, or exit, rather. Or, no, that's the entrance. He was at that entrance. And he stepped to the street to stop traffic for me to let me get out. And at that moment, Jack Ruby was coming back from the telegraph office. He'd sent one of his girls some money or something. He was coming up the sidewalk. And when Bond stepped to the street, he just zipped down the ramp there, and there he was.
Did you see Ruby that day?
I don't think he did.
What about you?
No.
You did not see
No.
Ruby. Okay. Roy Vaughn came under a great deal of criticism for
He did.
letting Ruby slip in there.
Yeah. Now, I'm getting my information of what happened from an officer that was off duty that was sitting across the street in the parking lot. And he saw the whole bit.
He saw Ruby?
Yeah.
He did.
Saw him when he went down the ramp.
Okay, so there's no doubt in your mind that that's how Ruby gained access to the basement.
There's no doubt in my mind at all how he got in.
Okay.
And it's what instance.
And so you're going around the side of the building when this next bit happens, which we're going to watch right now.
This is the basement floor of the Dallas City Hall, and that's a scuffle on the basement floor. It seems to concern photographers.
He has been shot. Oswald has been shot.
Lee Oswald.
Oswald has been
we're
shot.
going to switch now.
Police.
All right. That's got to be a nightmarish situation for the Dallas Police Department to have their prime suspect in one of the most...
It was a black eye, yes, sir.
Now, of course, your job was to secure the basement, and the shooting took place in the basement. So what sort of criticism did you come under after this happened?
I don't know that I came under any real personal. The department got a lot of criticism. But as far as me personally, I don't recall me getting any personal criticism.
In the clip we watched a few minutes ago, the reporter talks about how all the cars are being searched in the basement and IDs are being checked. Were you responsible for coordinating all of that?
No.
No. Who was? Was it Pat Dean, your sergeant?
I don't know.
Okay. How do you feel about Jack Ruby shooting Oswald? You knew Ruby.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about Ruby for a minute. What kind of a man was Ruby?
Jack Ruby's dead and gone. But he had always had high aspirations of being important, being recognized. I can't say what Ruby thought, what was in his mind, but I feel like that I felt like that Ruby thought he would be a hero for killing the man that killed a popular president.
How well did you know Ruby?
Well, I never had any I never was. All I knew of Jack Ruby, I worked the district that his places was on. And, but I never socialized with him or anything like that. So, I never made personal acquaintance with any of his dancers or anything.
Was Ruby the kind of guy that liked to be near the cops?
He did. He would. I don't know what Jackie Ruby wouldn't do to be recognized and be at the top.
I have heard that Ruby knew of your affinity for whiskey. Is there a story there?
I like good bourbon whiskey, yes. I don't use it, but I like it.
And Jack knew this.
Jack knew that. And back then, occasionally I did indulge a little. But she wouldn't let me much.
I hope I didn't get you into trouble. You didn't know I was going to ask you that. But what would Ruby do for you?
Well, if you need a quart of whiskey, it was there.
Okay.
I never asked Jack Ruby for anything. But around Christmas time or something, he'd just come out and drop one in the car or something. That's the way Jack Ruby operated. There wasn't any.
Would you say that most cities at this time had a character like Jack Ruby around the police station?
I would say they probably still do.
Okay. Now, the Dallas police had an internal investigation about the transfer. Jack Revel, I think, was in charge of that. What involvement did you have with that investigation into how Ruby got into the basement and shot Oswald?
Well, I don't know that I understand your question completely because I wasn't assigned to do any of the investigating. They
talked to you, though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you get the sense that they were trying to lay the blame on anyone?
No. I worked for the Dallas Police Department 27 years, and I never had any occasion to feel like that they were looking for somewhere to place the blame. Now, if you was at fault, they'd put it on you. But I never thought that I never felt like that there was any secret investigation or anything to try to come up with something.
You also testified to the Warren Commission in 1964. Do you have any memories of that?
Not right off.
Has this been something that's been with you over these last 50 years? Have you been contacted by researchers and book authors?
I've had books, I've had letters and things of that nature, yes.
Is it something you've been reluctant to talk about?
Oh, I don't mind talking about it to some extent, but I kind of felt like it wore out many years ago.
Does it surprise you that we're here in this room with all these people and they're eager to hear what you have to say?
I guess, frankly, yes.
Well, I think the big question that I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, here we are in 2014, 50 years after the assassination. Do you feel that Oswald did it by himself? Do you think there was a conspiracy?
I do not think there was a conspiracy. I think Oswald was alone in it. My estimation of Oswald, he had illusions of being grandeur, somebody that was recognized, somebody, because there was some anti-Kennedy feelings at the time, people out there that didn't like Kennedy, and I never voted for him myself, but I never had any feelings like that, But I think Jack Ruby was, he was about like a 16-year-old boy in a lot of ways.
Ruby was like a 16-year-old boy?
In a lot of ways, yeah.
Well, give us one way.
Well, some of the things that he would do, and I don't know, that's just how he struck me sometimes. Okay.
Sort of juvenile or just...
Yeah, he had a juvenile way about him in some ways.
And you don't believe there was any connection between Ruby and Oswald?
No.
No? No. Okay. I want to give the audience a chance to ask Mr. Pierce some questions. You should have gotten question cards. If you will fill those out quickly and pass them to the ends of your rows, we'll go through as many as we can. I actually already have a stack from our school group here that we'll look at some of these in a minute. Before we do, while they're filling out their cards, a few years ago you donated a couple of interesting artifacts to our museum. We're going to look at some pictures of them right now. This is a hand-drawn map of the Trade Mart showing the positions of different officers. Can you tell us about this?
Well, I don't guess I understand really what you want to know.
Well, how did you donated this to us a few years ago, and it's a very interesting piece. Was this used to show the officers where they were going to be at the luncheon site?
Well, that was just a map made up there at the police department where officers would be stationed, and that's what it was. I rolled it up. Well, frankly, I saw it on the trash can there in the police department one day, and I thought, that don't need to go in the trash, and I just rolled it up and took it home.
And with it was this assignment list. I mean, these are just extraordinary artifacts that really provide some unique detail on the protection of the president that day.
Yeah.
And you rescued them from the trash. I think you're to be commended for that.
Well, I just couldn't see it going in the trash.
And so you, rightly so. And we're very grateful that you brought them down to us about 45 years later and added them to our archives here. We appreciate it.
I think it would have been extremely interesting if we'd had something. Well, when Lincoln was killed, for us, some of the day-to-day stuff that was done then, and I just thought when I took that map, rolled it up, I said, you know, that don't need to go in the trash. It needs to be show what was going on at the time. You know, you got some fact there that of what was happening.
Right, absolutely, and because of that, we now have these extraordinary artifacts here at this museum. Let's take a couple of questions. Looking back over this experience, if you had it to do over again, would you change anything you did that day as far as securing the basement?
Well, I think anytime somebody, whatever happens to you that didn't work out just right, you try to make some new plans, wouldn't you?
Yeah. It seems like the right thing to do. Now, can you give us an example of what you would have done differently?
Knowing what I know now? Well, I would have, I guess I would have given the officers more specific instructions, and regardless of what happens, don't leave this post. It's the only thing I know.
I think it's important to point out what a difficult circumstance this was. The basement was full of reporters and cameramen. Had your people checked their IDs, or did you just assume they had already been cleared since they were already there?
You know, I don't recall who was. There wasn't, you know, there was just back then. There just wasn't a whole lot of checking and security and everything. If I guess if anybody came in there that had a press on them, they could get in. It's not like it is today, probably.
Ruby had been there on Friday, saying.
Well, Jack Ruby made a practice of coming down there.
Did you? Well, you weren't working Friday or Saturday. Had you seen him at the scene of other major stories, major local stories?
No. Jack came to City Hall real regular. And I don't know, I never did work by us, but I suspect I just have to speculate now, you know, if you own a if you own a nightclub, you have an occasion to know a lot of steady pack of people. Mm-hmm. And I suspect that Ruby was giving Bice a report on certain things. I don't know that for sure, but I very strongly suspect that he came down there ever so often and gave a report to Bice Squad, about what was occurring. Of course, him running a place like that, he didn't want them to know that he was doing it.
What was the scene like when you got back into the basement? We didn't talk about that. We talked about the shooting of Oswald, but how did you actually find out that Oswald had been shot? What scene did you come upon?
Well, everything was in chaos by the time I went around the building and got in front of that armored car and came back down. It was turmoil down there at the time.
Did you see Oswald when they loaded him onto the ambulance?
Yeah, I got down there before they loaded him on the ambulance. Yes, sir.
And can you give us a sense of just what was going through your mind when this impossible event happens?
I couldn't tell you. Today, I can't tell you.
If you believe Oswald acted alone, why do you think Oswald said that he was just a patsy?
Well, if you get caught, you need an excuse, don't you?
Here's another one. This is a good one. Roy Vaughn claimed that he never let anyone pass him. He was adamant about that.
Never left what?
Never let anyone, Ruby or anyone else, get by him. Did you and Roy ever discuss this? Did you ever talk about it?
Now, wait a minute. Let's clarify our English here.
Okay.
Roy Vaughn said what?
Roy Vaughn said that he never let anyone get past him.
Okay. And I think that's correct. Because he had stepped to the street to stop traffic, let me out, when Oswald came down the ramp. I mean, when he came down to the ramp to go down. And before Vaughn, by the time he let me out and got back, Vaughn never knew he went in.
So Roy Vaughn wasn't to blame because he didn't even see Ruby.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Did you and Roy ever talk about this?
I'm sure we have, but I don't recall any specific. There never was a doubt in my mind that Roy Vaughn let Oswald in the basement. It was a sequence of events that happened like it did that let this occur.
Did any reporters get pushy with you and your men that day?
Oh, I don't recall that. I'm sure they were anxious for news and all, but I don't recall any.
Did you do any on-camera interviews that weekend?
I couldn't truthfully tell you. I'm sure I may have.
Did you have the occasion to speak directly with Oswald that morning before the shooting?
No.
No? Okay. And the second part of this question.
Never spoke to Oswald.
Never spoke to Oswald.
Never spoke to Oswald.
And the second part of this question, did you ever speak with Jack Ruby after the shooting?
No.
No.
Not that I recall. No. Trying to get the sequence of events that occurred, but I don't recall ever having any contact with Ruby.
We'll take one more question today. The Jack Ruby trial in 1964, and I should point out we have one of the jurors from the Jack Ruby trial here, juror number 10, J. Wayman Rose. Wayman, let's recognize you.
No, I don't recall that.
Wayman will celebrate his 92nd birthday in this month, right? March? All right, March 29th. Okay. Well, the question was the Jack Ruby trial in 1964. Were you called to testify?
I've testified in a lot of trials.
You might have remembered this one, though. It was called the trial of the century.
Oh, what?
The trial of the century.
Oh, I know that. Yeah, but I don't recall the specific questions or anything that was asked. You know, I just can't recall that.
Okay. Is this the first time you've ever done a program like this?
Ever first time what?
Is this the first time you've ever done a program like this in front of an audience?
No, I've done them before.
Have you? Okay.
Yes.
What do people usually ask you when they find out that your job that day was to secure the basement?
What do they ask?
Well, how do they respond? I mean, that's such an extraordinary moment in history to be a part of.
Well, you know, I don't recall ever discussing it with anyone other than news media or situations like this. Now, just an individual out there on the street, I don't recall any people that I know.
It's not something you talk about with friends or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
I
Interesting.
never talked about my business with the police department off duty.
I see. Well, sir, you are a living legend, and we are thrilled that you are here with us today. Please join me in thanking Rio Sam Pierce.